Subject and verb agreement. So just like we talked about pronouns and antecedents needing to agree in number and gender, subjects and verbs also need to do a few things in order to agree in a sentence. So let's review first what subjects and verbs are. So remember, the subject of a sentence is like the star of the show. It's what the sentence is about. It tells you who or what is doing the main action. So you ask yourself, who or what is doing the action in this sentence? The verb, on the other hand, is the life of the sentence. It tells you exactly what's happening. It's the action. What is the subject doing? That is the verb, the action. So let's look at this example sentence and find the subject and the verb. Maniac loved almost everything about his new life. So we first ask ourselves about the subject. Who or what is this sentence about? Well, in this case, it's a person. Who? Maniac. And then we ask ourselves about the verb. Well, what is Maniac doing? Well, Maniac loved. That's the action. So if we look, we see that Maniac is the star of the sentence. It's all about him. So he is the subject. The word loved is the verb. It tells you what the subject was doing. He loved. However, there are times when the subject will come after the verb. And so there's an easy way to identify the subject, no matter what, so that way you will always correctly find it, whether it comes before or after the verb. So here are the steps that we're going to take to do that. Instead of asking first, who or what is the sentence about? Instead, we're going to first identify the verb. We first ask ourselves, what is happening in this sentence? What is the action? Once we've found the verb, then we'll ask ourselves, who or what is doing that action? So we'll first find the verb, then we'll find the subject. And if we take the steps in that order, we'll always correctly find the subject no matter where it is in the sentence. So a couple things just to remember, that a subject is never within a prepositional phrase. Remember back when we talked about phrases, a prepositional phrase cannot contain the subject of a sentence. To find the subject of a question, you turn that question into a statement. So instead of trying to find the subject and verb in the question, turn it into a statement. And then finally, the words there and here are never the subjects of a sentence. So let's look at some examples of these delayed subjects. So that means that the subject comes after the verb. And we're going to follow those steps in order to find the subject and verb. So our first sentence, there are many unverified legends about the life of Benjamin Franklin. All right, so the first step is to find the verb. What is the action in this sentence? Well, here you can't forget about those little to be verbs. So here the verb is are to be in existence. That is the verb in this sentence. And you can check that because if you weren't quite sure whether or not that was the verb, if you look through the sentence, there's no other action word. So we know that are has to be the verb here. So what is the verb talking about? Who or what are? Who or what exists? Well, if we look at this sentence, there are many unverified legends about the life of Benjamin Franklin. So what are? The legends are. So here, the verb is are, and the subject is legends. So you'll see the subject comes after the verb, making it delayed. But if we follow those steps, we'll find it anyway. So example 2, in the science building hangs the new projector screens. So first find the verb. What is the action in this sentence? Well, the only action that's happening here is hanging. So who or what is hanging? Well, the screens. The screens are hanging. So here the verb is hangs and the subject is screens. So if you follow those steps, first find the verb, then find the subject, you'll never have a problem. So let's take a look at another example. Diego takes the bus to school and find the subject and the verb. So first we ask ourselves, well, what's the action? Well, he's taking. Who or what is doing that action? Diego. So we found our subject and we found our verb. Our verb is takes, our subject is Diego. But what happens if it changes just a little bit? So instead, we have the students take the bus to school. Okay, same thing. Our verb is take, and our subject would be the students. However, there's an important difference here. So if you look, Diego takes has the S. The students take does not have an S. This is an important difference. A singular subject, like Diego, he's one person, needs a singular verb. So the word takes with an S is a singular verb. A plural subject, like those students, multiple students, needs a plural verb. So take without an S is a plural verb. Just like pronouns, they have to fit together or agree. So the subject and the verb must agree in number. If your subject is singular, your verb must be singular. If your subject is plural, your verb must be plural. So we're going to look at a couple rules about that. So again, this basic principle is that singular subjects need singular verbs, plural subjects need plural verbs. However, the trick is knowing whether the subject is singular or plural. Then you need to be able to recognize a singular or plural verb. So a singular subject is one person or thing. And here's where it gets a little tricky. A singular verb has an S. A singular verb has an S. And when we speak, we hear that naturally. It fits, he sits. We would never say he sit. That would sound wrong. So a lot of times if you just say it out loud, you'll hear it. A plural subject, so multiple people or things, they'll have a verb that is plural, which means it will not have an S. They fit, they sit. We can hear if we said they fits, they sits out loud, we can hear that that's wrong. So a verb with an S is singular, a verb without an S is plural. So let's look at some examples. So we're practicing singular versus plural. So Billy blank to buy a new skateboard. Our options are want or wants. So here, our verb is in parentheses. Our subject, who or what want or wants, is Billy. Billy is one person, so he's singular. So we need to pick out the singular verb. Remember, singular verbs have an S. That means we want wants because it has an S. It's a singular verb. And if you read it out loud, you'll hear that. Billy wants to buy a new skateboard. It sounds incorrect if I said Billy want to buy a new skateboard. So number 2, those two boys blank to buy new skateboards. Who or what wants? Those boys. And there are 2 of them, so that means this is plural. So we need the plural verb. The plural verb does not have an S, so we want. Those 2 boys want to buy new skateboards. Again, you would hear it out loud. If you said those 2 boys wants to buy new skateboards, you would hear that's incorrect. So a singular verb has an S, a plural verb does not have an S. All right. So a couple other things to note. Those indefinite pronouns. So those are the ones and the bodies. So we talked about these, the everyone, no one, nobody, either, neither, anyone, anybody. These are all still singular. So they will require a verb with an S ending. So remember the trick. Every one person, any one person, every single body, any single body. So to remember that those are singular, use that trick, and therefore they'll need a singular verb, which means that it will have an S ending. So some examples. Everyone in the class is going on the trip. Every single person, every one person in the class is, which is a singular verb, going on the trip. Neither teacher plans to cover the entire textbook. So not both teachers, neither single one of them plans to cover the entire textbook. So it is a singular verb because it has an S. So similarly, the pronouns several, few, both, many, and others are plural. Those are the ones that are obviously referring to multiple people. If we say both or many or several, obviously we're talking about multiple people, so they're obviously plural. Therefore, they require plural verb, so it will not have an S ending. Some examples. Several of my friends work in the library. So there are several friends. It's plural. So work, our verb, should not have an S. Many on the high honor roll study long hours. That's many people. We're talking about plural, many people. So study would not have an S. It would be a plural verb. So some practice. Everyone love or loves to eat ice cream in the summer. Everyone. We have to ask ourselves, is that singular or plural? Every single one, every single person love or loves to eat ice cream. So that is singular. So we need a singular verb. So that means we need the one with an S. Everyone loves to eat ice cream. Number 2, both of the students hate or hates getting a bad grade on a test. We're talking about both of these students. So both of them means it's plural. So we need the verb that does not have the S, hate. And again, if you read these out loud, you'll hear the correct answer. So both of the students hate getting a bad grade on a test. All right, so there are a couple more things to note. Compound subjects. So that means that there are 2 or more subjects joined by a conjunction. So those are those fanboys words. When you have 2 or more subjects joined by a conjunction, the result is a compound subject. So just a reminder, a conjunction, those fanboys, for and nor, but, or, yet, so. So you might want to write those down if you don't have them in your head. So when we're talking about compound subject, they have a couple special rules regarding subject-verb agreement. So we're going to look at those real quick. So the first rule is about the word and. So a compound subject joined by the conjunction and is usually plural. So that means that it needs a plural verb, so a verb that does not end in S. So if we have 2 subjects joined by and, it's a compound subject and we consider it plural because we're talking about multiple things. So for instance, the house and the barn belong to Sam's family. We're talking about 2 things, the house and the barn. We're not talking about one or the other, we're talking about both. So they're obviously plural because we're talking about both. So we need the verb that does not have an S. So we would say belong instead of belongs. Second example, a slice of toast and a glass of juice are on the table. So we're not saying that a toast is on the table or a glass of juice is on the table. We're saying both of them are on the table. So when we're joined by this and here, it makes it plural because we're saying both of them are on the table. So we need the plural verb, which is are. You wouldn't say toast and a glass of juice is on the table because is singular, are is plural. So when we join 2 subjects with the conjunction and, we have a compound subject that we consider plural. However, there are 2 exceptions to this. So we're going to look at these 2 exceptions when we're talking about the word and. So, exception 1. When the 2 subjects are really naming one person or thing, the subject is singular, and then therefore we need a singular verb, which means it should have an S. So what do we mean by that? Macaroni and cheese is my favorite food. So we have the word and here. However, macaroni and cheese is considered one singular food. When we talk about macaroni and cheese, we're not talking about a bowl of macaroni and a bowl of cheese. We're talking about one bowl of macaroni with cheese. It's one singular food. It just happens to have the word and in it. So because this is one singular food, we're ignoring that it has the word and it's singular. Therefore, it needs a singular verb, which would be is. So, second example, the librarian and reading teacher is Mrs. Jones. Okay, we have the and here. We have the librarian and reading teacher. Okay, except we're not saying that the librarian is one person and the reading teacher is another person. Both of those roles are being filled by Mrs. Jones. This one woman is both the librarian and the reading teacher. So it's one woman just doing two jobs. So even though we have the word and, we're still only talking about one teacher. So it's singular. So we need a singular verb. So we again have is. So our second exception, when we have the conjunction and, our second exception is when the word every precedes, so that means comes before a compound subject, it makes that subject singular, and therefore it needs a singular verb that's going to end in S. So let's look at an example. Every dog and cat has been vaccinated. Okay, we have dog and cat. We have the conjunction and. So it sounds like it should be plural. However, we have the word every. So it's similar to when we were talking about the ones and the bodies. Every single dog and every single cat. We're not talking about dogs and cats. We're talking about every single dog and every single cat. So therefore, since we're talking about them singularly, we need a singular verb. So we say has. So we have the singular verb because we're talking about every single dog and every single cat. So if the word every precedes a compound subject like dog and cat, then we're going to consider that compound subject singular and the verb should be singular as well. So let's look at some practice when we use the conjunction and. Ben and Pete want or wants to buy a new computer. So we obviously have our verb here in parentheses, want or wants. That is the action. Who or what is doing the action? Well, Ben and Pete. They want. So they are our subject, Ben and Pete. We have the word and there. So we have Ben and Pete want to buy this new computer. Both of them want to do this. So that means that it is plural because both of them together want to get this new computer. Because it's plural, we need a plural verb, which means we need the one without an S. So Ben and Pete want to buy a new computer. And again, you'll naturally do that when you say it out loud. So example 2, fish and chips is or are a specialty of local restaurants. So is or are is our verb, so who or what is doing that action? Well, fish and chips. So fish and chips is our subject. Okay. So we have the word and. Fish and chips is or are a specialty of local restaurants. Well, this is kind of like macaroni and cheese. Fish and chips is considered to be one singular food. It's not two different foods, it's one singular dish. So that means even though it's using and here, it's actually singular. So we need the singular verb, which is. Fish and chips is a specialty of local restaurants. Finally, every athlete and singer practice or practices to become better. So obviously our verb, our action is practice or practices. Who or what is doing this action? Well, athletes and singers. So athletes and singer. Athlete and singer has the word and, so it makes it sound like it is a plural compound subject. However, we need to note this very special word, every. So really what they're saying is every single athlete and every single singer needs to practice or practices to become better. So that means that this is singular because we're talking about every single athlete and every single singer. So we need the verb that has the S because that is the singular verb, practices. So every athlete and singer practices to become better. Every single athlete and every single singer practices. Finally, the last compound subjects that you need to be aware of are when we're using or nor. So these are really important. When two or more subjects are joined by the conjunctions or nor, the verb agrees with the subject that is closer to it, which is usually the second subject. But so if we have the words or nor, the verb agrees with the subject that is closer to it. So this will make more sense looking at some examples. So our first one, fudge or cookies are a good choice for dessert. So are is our verb. Fudge or cookies. What are? Well, fudge or cookies are. So that's our subject, fudge or cookies. Because we have this word or, we are only looking at the subject that is closer to the verb. So fudge or cookies. Which word is closer to our verb? The word cookies. So that means that we are totally ignoring this first part. So if our sentence looks like this, it would just say cookies are a good choice for dessert. Cookies has an S, it is plural, which means I need a plural verb, are. You wouldn't say cookies is a good choice for dessert. You can hear out loud that that does not sound correct. So cookies is plural, so we need a plural verb. So again, we have this conjunction or, which means that even though we have two subjects, fudge or cookies, we are only looking at the subject that is closest to our verb. We will totally ignore the fudge. We're only looking at cookies because it is physically closer to our verb. So another example, neither Tammy nor her sister likes to travel. So the action here is to like. That's our verb. Who or what likes? Well, Tammy and her sister. They are our subjects. We have the word nor. So because we have the conjunction nor, in order to figure out what kind of verb we need, singular or plural, we look at the subject that is closest to that verb. So that means that in this sentence, the word sister is closest to our verb. Sister is singular, which means we need a singular verb. So a verb with an S, likes. Her sister likes to travel. You would not say her sister like to travel. So because this subject is closest to our verb, that means that this singular subject makes this verb singular. So it has an S. Again, we totally ignore Tammy. It's like she's not even there because we have the word or we have the word nor. So last example, either the clerk or the secretary has or have the keys to the rover. So here's our verb. Our subject would be the clerk or the secretary. Who has or have? Well, the clerk or the secretary. We have the word or. So because of that, we are only looking at the subject closest to the verb. In this case, that is the word secretary. Secretary is singular. We're only talking about one person. So we need a singular verb. So the secretary has the keys to the rover. The secretary have the keys to the rover. Has is our singular verb here, and you can hear it when you say it out loud. So we completely ignored the clerk. We just looked at the secretary because we had the word or. So let's look at some more practice. The price or warranty is or are not as important as other factors. So is or are is our verb. And then who or what is doing that action? Well, the price or the warranty. We have the word or. So that means that to decide which verb we need, we are only looking at the subject that is closest to the verb. So in this sentence, the word warranty is right next to our verb. So that's what we're going to look at. And we're going to totally ignore this first part of the sentence. So warranty is or are not as important as other factors. Warranty is singular, which means we need this singular verb. So is. Warranty is not as important as other factors. Number 2, neither a new television nor stereo interest or interests Ben and Pete. So interest or interests is our verb, and then who or what does that interest? What is interesting? So the television or the stereo interesting them. So we have the word nor, which means that we look at the subject closest to the verb, Stereo. Is stereo singular or plural? It is singular. We need the verb that is therefore singular. Interests. So what is interesting, Ben and Pete? The television or the stereo? We're only looking at the word stereo because it is closest to the verb. Stereo is singular. We need the singular verb with an S, interests. And we totally ignored this first part. Last example, neither the president nor his family members was or were safe. So this is our verb. Who was or were safe? Well, the president and his family. So that's our subject. Again, we have the word nor. So we are looking at the subject closest to our verb, which would be his family members. So family members, we're talking about multiple of those family members, so that means it's plural. So we need a plural verb. So was or were is our plural verb. We totally ignored this first part. His family members were safe. Members is again plural. We need the plural verb, were. So when you have the conjunction and, you're looking at whether or not it is plural. When you have or nor, you're looking at ignoring the subject that is not closest to the verb. So finally, it's your turn. So some of the sentences in the following passage have errors in subject-verb agreement. Draw a line through each faulty verb and write the correct form above it. So you're going to go through these 5 sentences and do so. I will then check this for homework credit.